Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is September 18, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with James Cortides. Is that correct way to pronounce it?
Perfect. Thanks, Jerry. It's great to be here with you. Appreciate your time.
James, where in the heck you calling in from?
I am from the sunny sunshine state of Florida, Central Florida, kind of the Tampa area here. So thanks for having me across the country, through the waves, and then we get to meet each other like face to face. What a crazy situation! But thank you.
Live TV. I appreciate that. What's the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being, um, other human beings.
Dude, you started right off. You hit it out of the ballpark. My friend who studied with Wilhelm Reich, the best thing for a human being is another human being.
And
You're one for one.
Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Hell is other people." So I'm
Hell
the
is
other side.
other people, right?
Just to tell you real quick, I started watching some of your questions here before we caught on. I started getting nervous. I'm like, those are some great questions, and then I turned them off because I didn't want to know the general
Yeah, you
questions
don't
in the
want to
first
know. Yeah,
place. So I'm like,
yeah.
let's hope something surprises that comes out here. So I like it.
Oh,
I
yeah,
love the questions, by the way.
yeah. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Um, th- I would say person to person, face to face.
Yeah,
Um, Especially now in the digital age, quickly I've had this weird gestalt of having conversations with people via Zoom and then meeting these people in person. And there's just a dynamic there, a qualitative dynamic that's lacking in this sense that's present in the person to person sense.
yeah. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
We have no choice. It's a innate part of being a human being. We gather food to eat and we gather information to process. Right? It's this idea of we gather gathered the dust to create the human being, and we gather dust in the form of the food that we eat, the plants and the animals, and we're mindful about what we digest with our stomach. We also digest food information with our minds. So I think it's absolutely innate to who we are.
Yeah, I like your word dust because Marcel Duchamp used dust to make art. He let the dust gather and he go, "Oh, just leave it." And the art people were like, "Could we clean it up?" No, that's part. Do thoughts create emotions?
Sometimes I think it's a feedback loop between the thoughts and the emotions, but emotions can create thoughts and thoughts can create emotions. And I think that's a very structure of our psyche in a real sense.
James, fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I,
Think
yeah. Can
thinking
humans
Yeah,
go ahead? Sorry.
thinking is very hard. Thinking is lacking today, for myself included. I say for myself, most thoughts that appear are conditioned and seem to be my own, but are not. Thinking is a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing. So it's a difficult question too.
Is thinking more innate or more invented?
Innate.
Yeah. Can humans think without language?
No.
Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
Either find better words or violence. Uh, you know, that's what it's important. And I'd say that Heidegger said the language is the house of being. All right. So language is an important thing. And I don't think it's something that humans have. It's more like something language has humans. Ideas have people. I think is more the case.
Yeah. It's funny you said find better words or violence. Is that what you said?
Mhm.
Violence? So, McLuhan said that, and Christian Murdy both said that violence is our quest for identity. Are humans innately violent, or did we invent violence?
I think they're innately violent. You can look at nature and it seems cruel, right? But it's a cycle of life. You have animals eating other animals, but I'd say everything eats everything else up and down the chain. Violence is different because of, I think, the intention. And I think inherently humans are not violent, but that is within the human heart. So they are innately violent and peaceful. And I think that quote of identity is the quest for violence is, or violence is the quest for identity. Right? I think it's important, and especially in these times, right? Violence is a chance to make a distinction between self and other. And if that's not made through language, a lot of times it's made through violence. Identity is important, and we understand literally nothing about how and why it forms in our human culture.
Yeah, really good. I do recommend checking out Maria Gambudis, the anthropologist who sort of thought she proved that there were cultures that weren't violent. And then Rian Eisler wrote a book called The Chalice and the Blade. So some anthropologists say, no, we're hardwired to be violent. And she sort of said, no, we weren't. And I can prove it, blah, blah, blah. So
I
that
think we're
one thing,
hardwired to protect our identity.
yeah, yeah, that's good. One thing you touched on there that was good was I don't ask this question, but it's appropriate. Are the laws of nature cruel?
Are the laws of nature cruel? They can appear to be cruel,
Yeah.
and that appearance can be valid in a context, but inherently, no.
You're really good with words, James. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I
So
appreciate it.
I know this is a stupid question and it's both and it depends, but just in your gut feeling, are humans more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
I think you're right. And I think most people that you would ask this question would say it's both. And a lot of times that's a cop out, right? But I think we're hyper focused on quantity of either or. Are we thinking or are we feeling beings? So when I say that it's the combination of the both, I mean they're inextricably linked and it's a spectrum. And I think society and culture develops heavily to one side of the other, and the balance is kind of where I think it was the appropriate place. And I'd say that now we're moving towards the feeling side of things, which has its benefits, but also its problems, which we're seeing here. So didn't
Yeah.
want to cop out with just it's both.
Yeah. It's funny because someone did that at a seminar I did. They go, that's a cop out. And it's like, because I'm saying more. It's not really a cop out. I mean, I think that humans are both feeling and thinking beings pretty equally, but we invented the words feeling and thinking. So we think we can separate them and say, well, we're more feeling or more thinking. But 90% of people do say, I think we're more feeling beings. They literally say, I think. And my one friend sort of flips it and says, I feel we're more thinking beings. And I always follow it with Bridget Bardot's quote. She goes, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. How can you turn off your brain? It's like people meditating. They go, think about not thinking, you know?
Which just it's a recursive process of thinking ultimately. But
Right.
interesting, you said that we invented language. How did human beings get the knowledge, or how did they get the knowledge or inclination to invent language? Where'd that come from?
Right. No, I don't know if I said we invented language. If I did, I misspoke. I mean, we don't know. I maybe it was in the Chomsky quote,
Hmm.
language is not just words, but it's hard to say. I mean, Chomsky, as far as I understand, thinks we're hardwired for language. It's in us innately. You know, someone told me recently that, well, we're going to get into this. Let's carry on, but that's yeah, that's a great question. Like you asked me a question, I would just follow it up with the great John Cage. response. James, that's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer.
Beautiful. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer either. So let's, this is more like a
Well,
jazz than anything else,
it's jazz, and that's what got us together was McLuhan, who was totally after inventing new questions, but he operated in a form that was, I have to be academic, I have to be a book writer, I have to tell you concepts, even though he wasn't. He was teasing people to believe his percepts were concepts. It was a tease. So these are two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Yes.
Second one is, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is the case. I think that, I'm a Orthodox Christian, right, in my background, and the church fathers distinguish something called the nous. My email here is mindtheneus.com. The nous is something like the heart mind, right? The nous, it's also in Taoism, actually, that the heart and the mind are connected. So there are two levels to the soul's action in the world, and that is the level of gross thoughts and the level of spiritual thoughts. And the idea is we've been spiritually delimited, and this spiritual aspect of our nous, of our mind, has been covered over, and polishing the nous, right? Polishing the heart mind discloses and opens up new levels of thinking, ways of thinking that aren't calculative, instrumental, and just logical. They're translogical, they're supra-logical. But yes, I would say yes, it is a function of the soul.
Yeah, in that word nous, is that where Teilhard Chardin got noosphere?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
It means more than intellect.
Yeah. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
I mean, without going into what do you mean by think, I'd say yes, because machines are extensions of humans. Humans can think. So we've outsourced part of our thinking to machines. So I would say that would be a yes.
Do you more pursue meaning or more pursue happiness?
It's a good question, because in my life, the pursuit of happiness has always led to suffering, but out of the suffering, meaning came. So I think that pursuing happiness in itself seems like the thing that we're told to do, but it always leads to some sort of impasse where pursuing meaning puts the suffering and the happiness in appropriate context. So I think those are inextricably linked as well. Sorry.
Don't be sorry, man. You're really articulate. What I appreciate, James, is you're talking on like layperson's terms. You can talk in Heidegger and intellectual terms till the cows come home, and I appreciate that. But I think it's great that you can communicate to me in these terms and really not talk over my head. I appreciate that. So, does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
I'd say it is a reciprocal relationship, but consciousness, I would say, is fundamental. And I think that needs to be kept in mind, that we did not invent. We invented the world, but not through our hands specifically and alone. And that idea or the notion that we are solely the masters of our universe, the creator of our own values, is a destructive force. So consciousness is primary, I'd say.
Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I mean, they're linked, right? If you think of from a materials perspective, that thought is the transposition or the firing of neurons at different times and whatnot, which follows the speed of light. I'd say they're linked.
Yeah.
But we don't know what thinking really is. So
yeah,
I would say thinking. Yeah.
Oh, so you would say thinking's faster than speed of light. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say thinking. But I couldn't explain exactly why, because I don't think that we really know exactly what thinking is like. If is it receiving of information, is it a generating of information, or is it a synthesizing of the both? To
Yeah.
even think something like the speed of light requires thought. So,
Yeah.
and even understanding of speed requires thought. So I think thought is where I'd put my money on.
Yeah. Well, there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. So
Right.
you're knocking them out of the park, dude.
Let me
Okay.
keep score here. 10. There we go.
Yeah. Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer said, "You can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest?
I'd say, why is it presupposed that we are to dismantle the master's house?
Right.
Could be the case, right? But why is that such a presupposition? I would say that careful with that, answering that question, because it assumes, it begs the question, I think.
Right. Oh, I think you're really right. Okay. What new toy do you suggest?
That's a good question. And anything not digital.
Digital schmidgital,
Yeah.
anything not digital.
Not that
That
digital's bad, but it's just too much. It's too much. So football. It might be
football.
new to some.
Dude, I've thrown a Nerf football with homeless people for over 30 years.
Really?
Almost every day of my life. And it
Wow.
is so much a part of my arms that when COVID hit, I stopped for 2 years. And my arm started to get sore. And I don't know if it was related, but it was so strange. And it's not like really hard physical throwing because it's a light football.
I
So
like
I
that. Let me just add a little bit that I think somebody could say that you're throwing football with homeless people. What is wrong with you? Why don't you help them? Do something to help them.
right,
You spent 30 years throwing the football with them. Why don't you give them money? And you
right,
see immediately the absurdity of that perspective that is
right,
at the heart there, right? You giving your attention to these
right,
people, building a relationship
right.
over years, throwing the football. Help them, Gerry. Just help
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. No, it's great because Michael Ventura, he wrote that book with James Hillman that said, psychoanalysis is wrong. Anyways, he said that the best one of the best things you can do with a homeless person is to look them in the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're throwing the football, you got to look at the person in the eyes. And it is funny because I got paranoid. Oh my God, the football's gonna carry COVID germs. So I can't touch it. It's like, hey, okay, James, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Usually, it's the Greek church fathers have this term called logismo, which means like chatter of the mind. The Buddhists have the monkey mind, right, which is just kind of the automatic firings of the mind. A lot of times, stressors from the day will present images and thoughts, and that's what happens with me usually. And I try not to attach a lot of meaning to the kind of the negative thoughts that come. They're just kind of percolating before you go to sleep. So it could be a number of things, mostly
Yeah,
with my family and my kids, and if I'm being a good dad or a good husband and
yeah,
things like that. Yeah.
yeah. So McLuhan learned from Pound the poet that artists are the antenna of the race. And when I say artists, I mean painters, musicians, YouTubers. Artists are antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So I ask you, James, the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, because they are generated in the background, and they're not. It's not really apparent of the effects of our media, right? But it's striking that quote made me think of the term prophet. Right, the prophet or prophecy seems to be the spiritual prediction of the future, but it's more about being able to predict the present. I forgot whose quote it was, but it says it's easy to predict the future. It's the present that's the true prophet speaks into existence, right? And I think that prophets and artists use different tools or sometimes similar tools to show the water that we're swimming in. But
Yeah.
a lot of times, what is seen is frightening, and there a barrier where there's a kind of a barrier to entry to really explore what's actually happening in the present. So listen to your prophets, listen to your artists.
Yeah. Pretty dang good, dude. You're very clear, and I'm glad you did something on Wyndham Lewis ones because he did, sort of paraphrasing. He said, "Artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future."
Yes, that's actually that's a very interesting quote, and I've used it before, and I think it's similar in this idea is that a prophet is one that discerns patterns, right? You can discern patterns in the present that elucidate the past and the future, and
Yeah.
the future meaning always happens retroactively from the future, but only represented in the present,
Yeah.
which is it seems like a mind puzzle. But again, discernment, being able to read patterns and communicate appropriately, I think encompasses what he's getting at there, or maybe not.
No, well put. I love it. What you're telling me is refreshing me to look at it in new eyes. Because both Frank Zappa and James Joyce say all times are happening now.
Mm-hmm.
So, do artists have moral obligation?
Do they know? Should they? Probably.
Pretty dang good, dude. I usually know when an interview's good, is when I tear up, and that made me tear up. So this is
Okay.
really good.
Thank you. God bless.
James, are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
New ideas.
Yeah.
New ideas. It's because we're hyper focused on novelty and we're focused on whatever's new, whether it's technology. Technology is a physical form of an idea, right? And new technology is assumed and advertised to always be better, um, while older ideas, and give us some constraints or some pause. So this limitlessness that we've now understood ourselves to be progenitors are, right, without constraints, is hyper focused on the new, the novel, the new, right? The old is there for a reason. Like it's the idea of the difference between a conservative and a liberal. We should all be wanting to make a world where we become conservatives, because a conservative wants to conserve the good in the system, and a liberal wants to point to the corruption and change it. Isn't the goal to get to some kind of some satisfaction or some value in what we're trying to conserve? I think Eric McLuhan said that a true radical, right, is a conservative because he gets at the root, right? Radical means root. And I remember hearing him say that and it stuck with me and hit me right in the chest, right? A true radical, you think of usually a liberal or a leftist radical. A true radical is a conservative because it gets to the root. And what is the root we're talking about here? The root of culture, the root of who we are.
Yeah.
So thank you for the question. Yeah.
Oh, that was good. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
It's strange. I don't have a lot of memories that I can recall from early childhood at all. I don't know exactly why. One trivial one, but that's stuck with me, is this feeling, this sense of comfort and just at homeness, waking up in the morning with my grandparents and my parents being home, listening to the faint sound of The Price is Right on in the background, and kind of waking up to that and going in and seeing everybody there together. And that's probably because what happened later on with the family. That now looking at that back that's when I felt the least alienated in my life, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It depends on how you live your life and how you use it. right?
Yeah.
It could be, it is both in, it's both and there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
James, tell me, please, someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
I think my mother internally in my family, I saw her briefly. My parents were from Greek farmers. My mom was pregnant with me when she moved here. They both came to this country not knowing the language, kind of to make better lives, and watching both my parents struggle. But my mother, who ended up being a single mother, struggle to do things for her kids, had probably the most impact from an internal family perspective. Outside, I mean, it has to be someone that I'd
No,
say,
you put it in the context you want, however you want. Yeah.
I'd say Jonathan Peugeot, who's a friend of mine, has had a profound impact. Nothing about his ego or personality, but just him as a person has impacted me tremendously. So much so that I was able to return to the Orthodox faith that I was born into, that I left for 25 years, really because of him and how he pointed me towards the church fathers and many other things. So thank you, Jonathan.
So just briefly, your religion, you were raised a particular religion. You sort of just touched on it then you left it for 25 years and then you came back to it. What religion? That was Orthodox Christian?
Yeah, I was Greek Orthodox. My grandparents moved here with my family, and I would go to church with them as a child, Sunday school and church services until about maybe 12, 13 years old. And then I left it then and then started studying philosophy, political philosophy, psychoanalysis. And then cut 25 years later, I really got into Taoism. A lot of the other things happened. But then finally I found, I found everything I was looking for in the Eastern traditions, Buddhism, Zen, Taoism, Hinduism, Sufism, like all of these esoteric Eastern religions. I found it there in my estimation in its purest form in the church fathers, whether it's meditation, whether it's about prayer or thinking, asceticism. And I came back to it about just 4 or 5 years ago. Actually, I have 3 kids. They were all baptized into the Orthodox Church when that wouldn't even been a consideration just a couple of years ago. So I was able to return to what from the outside will look like as an irrational, superstitious, divisive thing, a Christian faith or whatnot. I was able to return to it satisfied intellectually, truly, with what I was endeavoring to behold and engage with. And I'm an infant in the faith, so I feel blessed. Yeah. So Greek Orthodox.
Beautiful. If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Well, I'd say that God talks to you all the time. And I'd say he doesn't exist. If you think of existence in terms of what it means, but let's not get into a philosophical question here, but God speaks to you all the time. And I think it goes back to the cleansing of the nous, the purification of the heart that opens up the channels of dialogue, of reciprocal dialogue. Because he's, so I think hopefully we continue the conversation we've been having after I pass. Yeah.
Yeah. That is you should hear it. 90% of people, you did a good job, Anyways, I love it. It's really beautiful what you just said.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I like it.
Yeah. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because again, it points to the structure that is not apparent, right? If does evil use people as a vehicle? So what is it that would be using people as a vehicle? Let's say it's evil, right? Or are people evil? I think it goes back to this question of identity, of how we can, through time, sin enough. And sin is not, it's a term that's very confused. And I was confused about it. Sin means to miss the mark. It's a term from ancient Greek, amartia, right? So you're aiming for something and you miss the mark, that is to sin, right? To aim for the highest ideal, right? To commune with Christ, to commune with God, to commune with the highest ideal that you potentially have. As human beings, we're going to falter, we're going to fail, right? But to repent is to go back and aim appropriately again. If you're not, if you don't have this mindset of repentance, of metanoia, of aiming for the highest high, then evil can take over you, and you can become an evil person, as it can take root inside the person, and by their actions they are evil. Maybe I don't know about that answer actually.
No, I like the word maybe in there, and it was really really great what you said. It again, it was communicated well. I got it. And the sort of follow-up question is, James, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I set it up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. It's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Yeah, this is a good question that I've thought a lot about, because I'm wrestling with the notion that I believe is the truth, is we are to love our enemies as ourselves. I
Yeah.
believe that is the truth.
Yeah.
I think it's the hardest thing to do. So I often ask my 8-year-old about that question and what he thinks about it, because I trust his intuition. Christ said, "Follow the babes." I trust his intuition more. But I think I really believe that love your enemies, that this intention of love, if it's really pure from a human being to another human being, is salvific. And then Christ says, love your enemies as yourself. If you can really love someone that slighted you, right? That is a healing effect, right? Hurt people hurt people. So if someone is your enemy, somebody has slighted you, if you can actually bring yourself to love them, it transforms the both of you, right? But that's very difficult. So from Alan Watts' perspective, if you acknowledge your enemy, right? What do you mean by acknowledge? Because you can acknowledge him by making the relationship and him or her worse off, or you can acknowledge him by completely forgiving them. People have not been forgiven in their life.
Yeah.
People get little encouragement and little forgiveness, actual forgiveness. That's why I think to sin is to miss the mark, right? If we're living appropriately in our society, we're moving towards these difficult things, to love our enemies as ourselves. And the first notion is to love God with all your heart. We can't even, God is a superstitious thing. It's for an ancient, archaic people. We're so hard pressed from a collective perspective to believe, not just to believe in God, but to act as if God exists, like Peterson says, but in a real sense. We're in trouble when I reflect on that. But personally, I think you are to love your enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. And so you said a word I didn't quite know how to spell. Salvific. How do you spell that?
It's SALVIFIC, I believe.
That's how I spelled it. That's a new word for me. I'm going to look that up. I appreciate that. And your forgiveness, forgiveness is the key in my belief too, because Mark Twain said, forgiveness is the smell the flower releases when the foot steps on it.
Wow, that's actually profound.
Yeah, it's hard to forgive. I mean, Ram Dass said it well too. He says, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush. It's like fill in the blank. I'm having a real hard time loving Trump or loving Putin or whoever. But, onward. James,
I think,
James.
wait, just to speak to that a bit, I think it's interesting that I quote about forgiveness is the scent of the flower after being stepped on. There's this idea of worship and glorification, right? What is worship? Worshiping God. Does a flower worship God? Yes, it does. It blooms. It glorifies the high, right? What does a plant do, or a flower? It takes its stem, it goes through its difficulty, it can go through cracks in the cement, it can grow. And what happens when it grows in its tallest area? It blooms. That is worship. That is worship. That is expressing and engaging in the beauty of creation. in the blooming of a flower.
Yeah.
How does a bird worship? A bird chirps, a wolf
Yeah.
howls, right? Um, so I think it's an interesting quote, and I appreciate you for sharing that
Yeah.
with me. Yeah.
It's also just saying the flower. One day on my bicycle, down where the kickstand is, some dirt had, gathered. And there was a seedling growing out of the dirt. And it was like, hey, I'll grow wherever you have a little pile of dirt. And that was to me like that. That was like, wow, you're persistent there.
We can learn
So
from that.
yeah, James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago, ran a movie theater called Volta Cinema. He says, basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Yeah, one can argue that that's part of living life because it's part of the culture that has been built. But I agree with you. I think it's really lost on us what's really happening when you go inside a movie theater with 50 other people, 100 other people, and you just stare at these images. And in doing so, you suspend your disbelief. Somehow that happens, right? And somehow you get invested in these characters or these images where they're actually feel real to you. You'll cry or laugh, you'll get scared. There's a lot there that's happening that we do not understand. And I think those quotes, I think, are partly from a McLuhanite sense, pointing us towards the absurdity of how we live our lives every day. They're pointing us, we're going to watch people live life. Even now, when I watch my kids watch shows on YouTube, it's mostly other kids playing, right? And I think if you dig in deeper, it goes to the really core of humanity is that we're mimetic creatures. The way that we learn, the way that we develop an identity is we copy others. First, it's our parents, and then rivalries develop through, if it's not done appropriately, mimetic rivalry develops. And I think that's the root of a lot of violence, kind of collective violence. But
Yeah.
what we do is we copy each other, and we need to find models, not scapegoats, in terms of who and what
Yeah.
we copy. That's a tough thing. So, yeah.
Models, not scapegoats. That's good. And Carolyn Casey, Coyote Network News. You've
Mm-mm.
got to check her. She's amazing. And done radio for 25 years. And she taught me this term biomimicry. So you said like we are meta creatures, we copy others, but we also copy nature.
Mm-hmm.
So did we start whistling because we heard birds whistle? That's a sort of simple one, but a good one is the guy who invented Velcro found it in a plant. He said, oh, this plant did it. Oh, I can now synthesize it with plastic. So it's how we make things because we're mimicking nature. So
Yeah, yeah. As
it
above, so below, right?
yeah,
As within, so without.
yeah,
So I think that's right. I think we do. I think it goes deeper than just nature, right?
yeah,
Because we are said to have the likeness of the divine creator, whatever that is.
yeah,
And so to copy and to mimetically copy nature is I think is part is true, but I think there's more to it.
yeah. Oh yeah, because Marshall actually said matching and making and made a distinguish the two. So walk us through just briefly, James. I mean, you're studying philosophy and psychoanalysis, and then you become a podcaster or YouTuber, and then is your profession home care, or tell us, your three main things there. I'm sure there's many more. Father, I love how you put father, husband. What was the tipping point to go, I'm going to study philosophy, I'm going to be a philosopher? Then what was the tipping point? I'm going to do this. I can do that. I'm going to do this podcasting and YouTubing. Yeah.
Yeah, they were both brought on by crises. Actually, the first one to so when I was younger, got in a lot of trouble. I was a partier, a troublemaker. I was not rooted, and I got into some legal trouble. And I had just finished junior college with no direction. And my friend that I grew up with, my cousin, my entire life, he was going to the University of Florida, and I applied to the University of Florida to Florida to get off probation, and it worked. And I couldn't believe I got in. And then when I got in, I found philosophy. I knew nothing about philosophy, other than this boring thing I know nothing about. I found it through political philosophy, and then it took off. So out of this crisis, I developed a really passion for philosophy, and then I started the podcast really in 2020, right when literally the month the pandemic happened, and that was a lot. Some of it was I was reading material and that used to profoundly impact me. I had a little bit more time to read because I was working from home. And the first book that I really and I just thought I'd share. I just start reading into my camera, mostly so I could listen to it back, at 1.5 speed when I'm doing chores. The books that I started publishing on YouTube, and the first was was Christ the Eternal Tao, which is a book that looks at the relationship between Taoism and Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And then from there, you actually can observe my actual conversion to Orthodox Christianity through my YouTube channel. And ironically, it was Marshall McLuhan and René Girard that played a major role in my coming back to my faith. So it's really born out of crisis, again, both of them. But, just a little bit on that, Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message. He also said Christ is that where the medium and the message collapse into each other. Yeah. And Girard said that every rivalry, every mimetic relationship with another human being will turn into a rivalry, and then violence will ensue. The only person we can model is Christ, right? Both McLuhan and Girard kind of had this idea. But looking at that from the outside perspective, is like, oh, what do you mean only Christians can be good people? No, that's not what it means. It means that we copy each other. We copy nature. The idea that the Logos became flesh, right? The God became man and gave us a model of how to interact with each other in order to fix our civilization building, which was, I think that the human beings build civilization. We build cultures. And the way that we build cultures is filled with sin, missing the mark, right? And we look to nature and we look towards other people to copy, to see what they do. The idea is that the Logos, the fundamental organizing principle of reality that's found everywhere, that all the mystics pick up on, was incarnated and showed us an exemplar that if you follow Christ's teachings, right, love your neighbor as yourself, right, the Beatitudes, all of these things, these aren't moral inscriptions. These are methods and behaviors to copy in order to build a civilization where you have relationships between people where things thrive. Right. So why didn't that happen? Why are religions so destructive? Why are there so many, sects or different, denominations? Why are there sick and hungry people? Why are there kids getting cancer without, any fault of their own? I don't know the answer to any of those questions. But a lot of times those questions are barriers towards exploring deeper what is meant by kind of these ideas that again, Marshall McLuhan and René Girard had a big impact on me coming to.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
It made a lot of sense. And it made me think of this one question I started to ask people when people said, we have to require cops to have body cameras. And I said, well, don't we want people to treat each other humanely because that's the humane thing to do? Or do we want to trap people and go, look, we got proof you made you messed up there? And we know that they can say, oh, my body camera wasn't working, or they can just angle the body camera and do something not good. So, as much as I felt for the people who were pro body camera, are we going to be more productive in shaping behavior if somehow we convince people that acting humane is the humane thing to do?
Yeah, that's a fundamental question, and I think it's one that we're dealing with here. So, for example, equity, which is this idea that sounds very good, right? Equal outcomes for all, right? Which sounds good, right? But imposing that from a top down, a lot of times Christ is used for ideas like equity, but Christ was very distinct and he was critical of the Pharisees and the people that were by on high giving these demands of moral demands. It cannot come from without. It cannot come from the government to coerce people to be good people. It has to be an organic outcome through the relationship of people with each other to come to terms with the idea we need to treat each other better. And I think that's possible, but I think it is a bottom up process. Once you try to oppose it from the top down, we've seen the evidence of that is a complete disaster. So I think it's an important, the question is, right, so how do you convince people to be good people?
Yeah.
When in order to do that, right, people, there's tools, psychotechnologies, there are metaphysical tools to do that. But when you think of it from a collective perspective, so much has been put into our consciousness to keep us from even considering looking towards those tools or those methods that I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, you sure articulated it well, though. That's what we need. And it really reminded me of, there's a scene in Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce where the guy's going to shoot this other guy and he goes, wait, I got to take a shit. And he goes, I can't shoot you while you're shitting. It's too humane. It's like, the kids who do joysticks in Langley, Virginia and kill people in other countries. It's like, they're not seeing these people's eyes. It's easy for them to play a video game and blow up collateral damage. Yikes.
Yeah. Not that it doesn't affect their souls. Maybe it's just not as apparent of how that affects their souls. Yeah.
That's a good point. Does it affect their soul, and how is it apparent? Yeah. Then they all commit suicide, or not all. There's suicide and there's all these diseases. Okay. So a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're making one of your YouTube videos?
That's a great question. I would tend to favor the former. Your intention should be clear in your art. But I don't disregard the latter from Kubrick there. It depends on what you're aiming for and what your intention is. Right? So for my videos, or what I just share what's interesting to me, what shines forth, what captures my attention. So I don't have an overall intention. I trust in the process of what I'm sharing is meant for someone and it will affect them in some way. Like the more that I think, the more that you try to intend something and put it, I don't know anything. I don't my thoughts and me knowing stuff has been the problem in my life. So like, it has to be kind of a give and a take between an intention and an allowance of what's coming through. And I think you have to kind of say the same with those two quotes, Yeah.
You said, I don't know anything. That's why you're on a podcast called I'm Probably Wrong About Everything.
Right. Hey, touche.
No, the Fireside Theater, the Beatles of comedy, they said, everything you know is wrong.
Mm-hmm. That's so right. Like to sin is to miss the mark. That's why I like to use the term sin, which means you're not aiming appropriately. So everything you know is wrong. Everything you're thinking is inherently fractured or has sin in it or is missing the mark. So I think that's exactly right. Everything you know is wrong, right? Is fractured, is incomplete.
Yeah. Well, you would love, Frank Zappa's one of his first songs was called I'm the World's Greatest Sinner.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, look it up. It's an amazing.
I
mean, it's just a stupid little floppy early rock and roll kind of song, but it is pretty amazing what it entails. And
when you go to a monastery, which I've visited a few, you meet a lot of monks who have given up their entire life to do the Jesus prayer from the Greek Orthodox perspective, right? And when you meet them, some of them, they won't look you in the eye. They're always looking down to keep them humble, right? And when they write you a letter, the highest monk, right, will usually sign it. Not all of them, right, will sign it, "Forgive me, a sinner." Right. So these people, the most holy people on the mountain that have given their life to Christ, they are the sinner. They see themselves as the bigger sinner, as the biggest sinner, and that is really something, right? And I think there's something there that we don't understand, but
Yeah.
is important for civilization building, is to take on the sin of the world onto yourself, not to blame or shame yourself, but to
Yeah.
have responsibility, like
Yeah.
gross structural responsibility for what's happening in the world. Right.
Yeah.
So I am the biggest sinner, I think, is right on. I agree.
But let me get the wording right. Forgive me, the letter A, sinner. Is that
Mm-hmm.
what they say? Forgive me, a sinner.
What, the prayer?
No, yeah, when the monk signs, you said he signs at the end of his letter, the monk signs, "Forgive me, a sinner."
Yeah, I think he'll say yes. Forgive me, a sinner, or it's very, self-deprecating, but not in a performative way, right? Because they've
Yeah,
given up. So I think there's something what's happening in the monasteries. It is something like the pluripotent cells of a body, right? When
yeah,
the culture degrades, when someone is sick, it's the marrow that produces the resilience for that body to come back to life. So I
yeah,
think the monasteries, the monks in from each religion, right, that go in the monasteries and pray all the time, I think that's where the stem cells of the culture is. And a lot of times where it seems like we're getting down to the root, to the bone of things. So there are places where we can still get divine and spiritual energy from, in order to rebuild or to adapt.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Leo O'Reilly, he's a priest who hung out with McLuhan, and he's been like a priest for 50 or 60 years. Do you know that guy?
I've heard of him, I think, through McLuhan, but no, I don't know. I'm not aware.
Anyways, we should do a salon with him.
Yeah.
He's really fun, and he's in an elder's home in Toronto, and he's just so joyous and funny. I asked him all these questions, and he had a ball with them. But he he's he's almost like you're carrying on his way of wording this stuff in a a, a beautiful way, because he's like, he's been there, done that for years, and now he's sort of like maybe ready for his transition. He's just sort of laughing. you
So
know
for him, the question to his memory, a gift or a curse, is definitely a gift, because the fruit, you can tell the roots by the fruits. So somebody in their
Yeah,
old age, they have
yeah,
a light countenance on their face,
yeah,
and they tell you about their joyous experience. That's just a natural, organic thing. They lived well. And it's not
yes,
easy to how to live well on the front end, but on the back end, you can tell if someone lived well.
yeah,
A lot of times from their face, your
yeah,
face is the most expressive thing. It's where culture is happening, is at the face, right? So you can
yeah,
tell how you lived your life or how someone lived their life, by their countenance, the way that they share their face with you, and the way that they share their experiences of the world. But I think it answers your question, on memory. It can definitely be a blessing.
yeah. It's really good.
Yeah.
And so McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. He calls it a human sensorium. So knife and fork extend our teeth, shutter and a camera extends our eyelid. Even non-tangible religion or philosophy is an extension of consciousness, whatever. What does the YouTube video extend for you? What humanness?
For me, it seems to be dialogue.
Yeah,
I know that might be the most evident one, but I think, kind of at first pass, I
no,
would I
that's
would change my answer to I don't know. But like, it's like saying, what is the internet when it first came out? You could say, oh, this is because I can share electronic messages with other people, right? So it's a method
yeah,
of communication. When the internet first came out, now let's look at the internet. I think the same thing with YouTube. I could say dialogue or X, Y, Z. But I think the potential and what this is, McLuhan talked about creating art and about getting involved in the culture. Terrence McKenna talked about don't watch things, create them. So this is an
yeah,
opportunity, gives people an opportunity to connect with each other, to create with each other, to dialogue with each other, and to literally probably build parallel structures as things degenerate in the old institutional and in old kind of old medium, which is passing, right? The new medium is always engaging with the old medium, right, in different forms. So I
Yeah.
think McLuhan his time is still to come yet. It's
Yeah.
still to come. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was good because, when people go, "What does film extend?" They'll go, "Memory or vision," and Marshall said films extend your foot because you're
Mhm.
traveling. But see what
Yeah.
you did, yeah, you're traveling because you're on a magic carpet ride, back to how you described us all watching a film together. But with the YouTube video, even that, all it was is we're watching TV, but we made it two-way. So we're creating, it's like talk radio as opposed to radio. Radio is you just listen. Talk radio is you have a dialogue. So no, that was
Hmm.
good. I like that dialogue. And so Michael Apted, a great filmmaker, said 40 years ago, he goes, "Why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast?" And most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922 in France, but in 1980, MTV was causing Marty Scorsese to say, "I cut my films faster because of MTV." So Michael Apted said, "Because we've learned to take in information faster." So I asked the question, to literally learn to take in information faster, or we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I think it definitely has a profound impact the way that images come across one's mind, right? And I think this proclivity to quick edits and fast edits that you see in music videos, it has an impact, and the impact has to do with speed. Speed has an impact of heat, of intensity, of having a response. And what are you looking for from rock music is some sort of emotional, response. Same thing with advertising, right? You need the response is going to happen, and I think the rapidity of the images gives it a certain valence of a response towards a certain outcome, to buy the song, to like the song, to buy this product. Look at drug commercials where you have soft music and butterflies playing in the background. It's about a medication, about psoriasis, and on the end of the advertising, all of these terrible, horrible side effects that are present. But if someone has psoriasis, they're so emotionally linked to that disease, and they think it's something, a pill that would help them with it. It could be anything. Psoriasis is a bad example. That whatever that small voice that says causes, headache, whatever that is, that means nothing when you're emotionally charged by a solution towards an ailment that you have. This is all played in a background of quiet, soft music, people in a field. So that slow edit, right, and that music and that voice has an effect on the consciousness, and that's to buy this pill. Don't think about it. Buy this pill emotionally because it's going to solve your ailment. Same thing with, I think, the rapidity of images in rock music. It's feel this intensity, right? Feel this intensity. So I think it's sense. It makes sense why they
Yeah,
do it.
but do humans literally can humans literally multitask?
I'd say, can a human being run a 4-minute mile? It could have. The answer to that was no forever until someone did it, and now everybody does it. You
There
know the
you
story there.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
So is it? Can we multitask? I'd say yes. If we're building tools that are extensions of ourselves, then it seems cogent and coherent to think so.
what that was good. What was the motive of the cave artist? Your hunch.
To represent his experience,
Yeah.
right? So again, we're mimetic creatures. So here's a piece of artwork of what I did or what I can do or what I want to do. Somebody looks at it on the board or on the wall, a kid, wherever it is. Oh, someone's got a spear towards an animal, right? You start having mental representations of that event without having to experience it, right? So you're already starting to kind of experience it. And quickly, Jacques Lacan is a French psychoanalyst, kind of really, um, what's that word I'm looking for? Figure that a lot of people don't like and some people love. He's one of those kind of polarizing figures. Talked about how His first seminar has a book of an elephant on it, and he said that the symbol of the elephant is way bigger than the elephant, where human beings can take the symbol of the elephant and they can do more with that symbol than you can do with an actual elephant. So the symbol is larger than the physical thing that it's meant to capture. It's a way to look at how our ability to leverage language and use language is profound. But sorry, I might have lost the thread of your question there. Yeah.
No, you did it well because it evoked Tesla got dissed by Edison by electrocuting that elephant. And that was a perfect example. That's so much bigger than an elephant, but an elephant's really big. And to have that elephant fall with that old film footage to diss Tesla, that's like, whoa, that's really good. I'm glad you brought up Lacan. And so what's more important, conviction or compromise?
Depends on the context. From a cultural perspective, we're at a time where less conviction, more compromise might be good. At other times, more conviction. If you think about, just generally from let's say the 50s, the constrained culture of the nuclear family had a lot of problems with it, right? So you needed some conviction and some courage to maybe overturn some structures that have become corrupt. But when this overturning becomes an end in itself, then we're going to need conviction to go the other way, right? So, conviction to go back to some sort of sanity in a sense. So I think it depends on the context.
Yeah. You've accomplished a lot. Rate these three elements in your accomplishments: luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
I'd say luck first, and then skill and ambition is kind of like a feedback loop. I would put them at 2 or 3, kind of reciprocally. Actually, all 3 of them. It's like a circuit, right? Because and each can go wrong if it's just one instead of all 3, right?
Yeah, I got that recently. Someone said it's a loop, and it's like a Mobius strip. T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
I don't know. Some people say people think in language, some people think in images. I don't know how it is. Like, I don't have access to that for some reason. I don't know. I don't think I see images, or I don't see words. That's probably when you asked me, I forgot what your question was about thinking. When does thinking happen? I said, when you thought happens, because maybe
I don't know what I think until I
think. Yeah. So that's probably why, because I don't have a clear idea of how thoughts come.
Well, no, James, that's my favorite answer is Abigail Child, New York experimental filmmaker. I says, what language is your inner dialogue? And she goes, I wish I knew.
Hey, if I had that Rosetta Stone, I'd probably be all right. Yeah.
But it's fun when people. So 2 of my film heroes have similar feelings. George Manupelli mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mika says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, a great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So it's a stupid question. It's just your feelings jump off. And is art making, let's say in your case, YouTube podcasting, is and generally it's actually more so your observations of artists' motives in general. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology, culture, or environments are dominant?
Again, it goes back to this theme of identity. When you say self or self-expression, what do we mean by self? Because we are not just what we think about ourselves. We are also the ideas that have us, right? And I would say that it's probably the case that there are beings that are larger than humans in terms of body and intellect that we don't perceive, right? We can perceive a dog, and we are kind of in communion with the dog. It's hungry, it's emotional with you, but the dog doesn't know that you have a 401k or that you worried about your meeting next week. It has no concept of that, right? So I'd say that it's the case that we get captivated by ideas, which in doing so, we become part of other bodies, right? Part of larger bodies that, that we can't understand. So I think it's just a mechanism. It's just the way reality lays itself out is that identity expresses itself through an individual self and then also through a collective, a
Yeah.
collection. So I think it's both and.
Yeah, it's what meant I contain multitudes too. But
Mm-hmm.
here's a question, James. Can art making be egoless?
No, I don't think, and I don't think it should be. I think Terrence McKenna said, "Your ego is not your amigo," right? But I think that's not the case. The ego needs to be reappropriated into the subject, into the self appropriately. Again, it's become out of control, right? But we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't throw our persona out. We don't throw the mechanism that we use to engage with others out because it's become an asshole, right? I think it's more of the scapegoating. So I don't mean to use foul language there. I think that the ego is a tool for the soul to express itself in physical reality, right? And I think it's been tinkered with. That's what, when we think of the good demon and the bad demon, right? The angel and the demon on the shoulder, it's tinkering with this mechanism, right? So I think it's yeah.
Is perception reality?
Yes, but absolutely, it is a form of reality. I don't know how you could dispute that. Is it perception the ultimate expression of reality? No.
Yeah.
But it necessarily has to be part of reality, right? Right? Would you agree?
Yeah. I go along with Lily Tomlin. She says, reality's just a collective hunch.
Mm-hmm.
We're all saying, yeah, well, that's what language is. We all sort of agree. Well, my one friend, I says, is perception reality? He goes, that's all you got.
Yeah,
But we
yeah,
want to think there's something that, yeah, I think when you said it's a form of reality, it's just continuously interesting how people tackle that because it's such a simple question. Is perception reality? It's only 3 words. And
yeah.
it goes all over the place.
I think go back to the term sin again, right? I think
Yeah,
that I haven't thought this. This hasn't been the way I've thought for most of my adult life, but there is something out there like the truth. There is something out there that is the truth, right? If you can think of it from a platonic sense, there are these ideal forms, and then our thoughts and ideas, our perceptions and our intentions, do they conform more or less to these ideal forms? And if they do, you're living a good life, or you're living the well life, the good, the true, and the beautiful. So when you say that reality, or that quote that Lily Tomlin said, that reality is a collective hunch, presupposes that there is a right way to
yeah,
conform to reality. Because what are you hunching about?
yeah,
Right? And why would there even be the case that these monkeys that learn to code, through language, would care about how the right way to treat people are? And why would we change the way that we treat each other if there's not ultimately an ideal that's not immediate available to us, but it's there? All right.
yeah,
We should be aiming for it. And when we fail, which we obviously do all the time, we need to repent, which means to aim again. That's all it means, right? So I'd
yeah.
say there is something. Would you believe that there is something like the truth in the
Well,
world?
this is perfect lead in. First of all, the aim again is Beckett, fail once, fail again, fail better. But you led into this perfectly. Louis Buñuel, and it's sort of my answer to you asking me that. Louis Buñuel says, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. Now, 99% of people go, that's so right on. I agree. And one guy finally said, that's bullshit. If I'm going to seek the truth, I'm seeking it because I think I am going to find it. So this led me to this question. The cliche, and as Marshall would say, turned into an archetype, is that the journey is more important than the destination. Why do we have to seek or name a destination if the journey is more important? What he was saying was, why do we have to say I'm seeking the truth when it's just the journey is what's important? So, any thoughts on that sort of mangled two quotes.
Well, I think that's was that a Beckett quote you let off with?
Well, the first one was
Yeah.
fail again because you said aim again.
Yeah.
That was Beckett. He said fail again, fail. Yeah,
And who was the second
fail.
one that said seek the
Then
truth?
Louis Buñuel, the filmmaker, says, "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it."
I think that's a profound quote, and I think it's informative. We can go back to the 10 commandments. The first two commandments are, you shall have no God other than me, right? And the second one is, you shall not make graven images. That is exactly what this quote means to me. To seek the truth means you're plugged into the infinite, the mystery. It's unknowable, right? It's not unarticulable, right? If you plug into it, if you're not plugged into it, right, and you're seeking the truth and you think you found it, it necessarily becomes an idol or an ideology. Ideologies are idols. They're idols in the form of thought forms, right? So if you have someone who's seeking the truth and part ways from someone that's found it, you have, again, the Pharisees, you have the people that are on high saying that I have the truth for whatever it is, right? They're done seeking. They're imposing it on humanity, right? So it's I think your friend was right to question it, right? Seek those that found the truth, but part ways that from those that say that they found it. But also, you know, people find the truth and they realize that they don't have the answers. Usually it's the
Yeah.
people that, that Socrates says, all I know is that I know nothing, right? So
Yeah.
it's a fraught topic when we bring
Yeah.
in these ideas of truth.
Yeah.
But it should be comforting to understand that there is the truth out there, right? Nietzsche said that no, there is no ultimate truth. There is no ultimate truth. That it's all a matter of perspective, which is itself inherently a truth, right? Saying that there is no absolute truth and everybody has their own perspective. I'd say that there is something like, I think people have lost that idea with this relativism, which has its place when it's become ubiquitous like this. People don't have anything to stand on. They have nothing to hope for. They have nothing to reach for. They have nothing to aim for. And from a collective perspective, this has obviously disintegrating effects on the social body, which is our body. So there is the truth out there.
Yeah. It's like Sidney Lumet made socially aware Hollywood films. They asked him, "Do films do anything?" He goes, "No, but it ain't going to keep me from trying."
Oh, I like that. I like one
Tell
that
me,
brought up this quick idea
yeah,
that McLuhan brought up for me too. Is it possible to reverse engineer these tools like film, like advertising, the way that the advertising has disclosed a way human beings think, imagine, and interact with each other, is
yeah,
used for the profit of others and to sell products, right? And social media and all of these things that are used for profit and for to capture attention. Is there a way to reverse engineer these tools where, now that we know they're part of our human external body or our extensive body, is there a way we can consciously use them to create art, digital media, and whatever it may be for the thriving and the well-being of a people? I don't
that,
know the answer to that.
oh, that's what Marshall learned from reading Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people. That it's in his first book, The Mechanical Bride. It's the first paragraph. It says, advertising works. Well, why can't we use their techniques to educate? Well, that's because what advertisers are using is symbolist poetry, which is
Mhm.
effects precede causes, which is Mallarmé saying, I don't write a poem, I write the effect.
Mhm.
I tried it. Yeah. So that was, people rarely get that in McLuhan. You got that. That's pretty dang good, dude. That's
Yeah.
really good. And so, James, tell me one major element, just briefly, of your YouTubes that's changed and one major element that stayed the same.
I'd say what's changed recently, what stayed the same is my exploration of ideas, people, and culture, right? That, like the rooster's crow, right? So the rooster's crow, the story from the biblical story, is the Peter, who's Christ's closest disciple, was told by Christ he's going to deny him after the rooster crows 3 times, right? So then when it happens, the rooster crowed once, Peter denied that he knew Christ. The rooster crowed once, twice, and 3 times. In that third rooster's crow, Peter realized that he just denied Christ, denied God, right? And that there was simultaneously the worst day of his life, but it was also the best day of his life because it brought him to repentance. It helped him see that he was not aiming appropriately and then aim appropriately, right? So that is something that I've been exploring in my conversations, and recently I've been more interested in exploring these ideas from the Orthodox Church Fathers and from Eastern Orthodoxy, putting them in dialogue with something like psychoanalysis from Jacques Lacan, and all of these things in Heidegger that seem separate, but there are these overlaps that are absolutely beautiful and tremendous. And I'm trying to share them and explore them. And I'm not trying to convince anybody of them, but I want people just to see and respond and share what they see with these putting these ideas in dialogue. Like what is the soul? What is the psyche? You said psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis means the analysis. Psyche means soul in Greek. Analysis means to analyze. So psychoanalysis is analyzing the soul, right? I think it's born out of the idea or the process or the ritual of confession. If you go to an actual spiritual father, which are few and far between now, that can sit there with you in confession and take your sins together and give them, sacrifice them to Christ, right? It's akin to talk therapy. When you go to an analysis, but that person is not there unconditionally loving you. That person there is not analyzing you, judging you, another kind of factor, right? And then prescribing medication or cognitive behavioral therapy. So psychoanalysis is a degenerate form of confession, but I'm not dogging psychoanalysis for it.
Yeah.
I think, but matching the two and bringing the two together of what is this miracle that happens both at confession and if you have a good psychoanalyst that can, untangle balls of psychic neuroses that have been terrible for your life, that energy dissipates and you have well-being again. What happens in psychoanalysis? What happens in confession? What is this about talking to others that has a salvific, a healing effect on all those involved? I think it's interesting. So that's what I'm focused on now.
That's really, really well put. So Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. James, tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
This again goes to the heart of Orthodox asceticism, right? There's something called the passions in Orthodoxy. Have you heard of this term?
No, go ahead. Tell me.
So the passions are the term passion is that which makes us passive against the forces that act within us. So a passion, sex is a normal, organic, beautiful part of life, right? But these are entry points for the passions to inflame the heart. So someone can, sex obviously with pornography and whatever, maybe can have a degeneracy. And that's when a passion takes root, right? Drinking alcohol, right, is not in its health inherently a passion. But if someone drinks alcohol and they keep drinking, it gives little points of entry for the demons, which negative thought forms, call it whatever you want, to take hold in someone's body and to kind of bring the soul down, right? So sex, alcohol, reputation, status, it's not a bad thing to have a passion to be a great CEO. But you can sell your soul to the devil and you become this CEO that's inflamed with these passions. So for me, I deal with my passions every day. I suffered from, addiction. Addiction is, I think all addiction, alcoholism really can be fundamentally rooted to the passions that have taken hold, and the actual method for ameliorating them have something to do with like repentance or metanoia. Metanoia, the term meta means transformation. Noia is from the term nous. So metanoia, what happens when an alcoholic goes to Alcoholics Anonymous and it works? They have a spiritual awakening. It's like hitting bottom. Hitting bottom, there's nowhere else to orient yourself but up because your back is against the ground, right? Yeah. So it's a way of reorienting yourself. I deal with passions every day. Being hyper stimulated by intellectual reading is a passion. Yeah. Right. Because it takes up time and sense I could be spending with my family, so good things. It's not whether something's good or not, right? But these things that we get really capture our attention can become, they can capture our attention. Yeah. So I deal with those every day still. Yeah. And I will till I die.
Yeah. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
I'm going back to the church fathers. They say anger can be righteous when you hate the sin. When you hate sin, right? if you're an addict, right, and you have a heroin addiction, to hate heroin and what it's done to you, right? To hate the sin, right? That's a righteous anger, but you got to be careful, right? Because it would need more to explain that, right? Because being resentful of what happened to you can kind of have the opposite effect. But you can be angry at the sin inside yourself. So I'd be interested. You look that up, the context around that, the righteous anger towards sin, because you'll see it's interesting, more interesting than I could probably express it.
Yeah, and that would be good with Leo. Someday we could have a Solanas about hating the sin, not the sinner. That's another part of that. So very good. You create what you resist. It's just a thought. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve.
Mm-hmm.
And back to Louis Buñuel, he nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So this line, this thought, I'm just saying, not specifically for you, James, but in general in the world, you create what you resist. Any thoughts on that thought?
Yeah. Yeah, I think phenomenally in my life, it's been true, right? That which we resist persists, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to explore in oneself, is the nature of the resistance, because a lot of times desire, the resistance, right? We get addicted to the feeling, even the negative feelings of the resistance, right? And it's almost worse when the resistance is ameliorated. Going back to addiction, it's almost the thrill of having to find whatever it is that you do or hiding it from it and whatnot, where actually you get it and you don't get that reward from the desire until you're not feeling well again, right? And now that desire's peaked in this nasty thing that makes you want to continuously go towards whatever it is that's ruining your life. It's this resistance. I think it's right that what we resist persists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
from my
good.
experience. Yeah.
So I asked for 90 minutes. We have 8 more minutes. Can you go a little longer or you got to go in 8?
I can go a little bit longer.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll go another 10 after that if you could. That's fine. It
Okay.
just gives me some ideas. I really appreciate this.
Sure.
Can you forget to die?
That's a good question. We often forget that we're going to die, and I think that's a problem. And memento mori and keeping death front and center in consciousness, I think, is a good thing. Is a good thing for your spiritual health. Can we forget to die? I don't know. Maybe if you live life so fully and integrated, there's this quote that says, "If you die before you die, then you won't die when you die." Have you heard that before?
Oh, that's good.
If you die before you die, then you won't die when you die. It reminds me of this idea: can you forget to die? If you really have appropriated the idea that death is a transition, right? That it is a transition towards the next stage in a process. If you really believe that, then you probably can forget to die and just move on like you do in dreams or from in and out of the dream space. So thought-provoking question.
Yeah, you handled it really well. And Hollis Frampton, great experimental filmmaker, said narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. So it's sort of like, why do humans have, I think most people think storytelling and narrative is innate in us, that we just do it, But it is interesting. You can't prove anything. One of my friends says everything we do is invented, But it is this thing about our fascination with death, and our over fascination with it, maybe,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
How do you find peace of mind?
Who says I do? That is something that escapes me. I do when I'm with my kids, when I'm with my wife, when I'm with my family. Yeah.
Yeah, It's good. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I don't know that I would go up to myself and say anything. I don't know that I would do that. I might just sit there and cry a bit. And it's like, hey, buddy, you're gonna have to go through what we went through. So I'm not gonna take that away from you, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna weep with you here. And I'll pray for him actually. I'd pray for
yeah,
myself. Yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah, the great New Orleans pianist, Dr. John, I asked him all these questions. When I got to that one, he goes, I won't go there. It's almost like, no, I'm not
Yep.
going there.
Mm-hmm.
These are 5 Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a few words. First one, who started it all?
God.
Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
I don't know.
Who's cleaning it up?
We are.
Is it serious?
Sometimes.
Beautiful. Couple more and we're out of here. This has really been fun, James.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Yeah. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll? Over or under?
Over. Absolutely.
Why?
Because I said so.
Well, you're right, because the patent, 99% of people know, and which is 100 years old, has it going over. But you should hear the people who say under and their reasons. They have their legitimate reasons. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
I don't know. To be determined. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. It's a good question.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Glue.
I got that answer a couple times. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
I wouldn't. Well, I'm not gonna say that. In my family's home, somewhere they want it.
Yeah.
What would it be made of? Whatever they want to make it out of. But
Nice.
I don't know if I don't know if I want a statue made of me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Tell me something good you never had, but you never want.
Something good you've never had, but you'd never want. Wow, that's a tough one. The death of a loved one.
It's good. Wait, that's not good, is it?
Well,
no. We don't know if death is. Yeah, no, you're right. Because you know what answer I've had is immortality. So I understand what you're saying. The death of is good. It could be good. You never had it, and you never want it because you don't want him to die. No, that's very interesting.
Like Ram Dass says, something, and I agree with him. And there's this idea, and from my experience of being by someone's side that's dying, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. And the family gathers and there's healing that happens there, that it's like that heals. It can, or it can make things worse, right? It heals the rifts there. Ram Dass would sit and die with people all the time at the end of his life, or, he would. So there's something about death and life that are inextricably linked. So I've been through the process and I've seen the beauty of it, but it's one of the most difficult things.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's a very valid answer. It was heavy for me to get at first because when Ram Dass wrote this book on hospice care, he gave it to a friend. He says, before I publish it, could you give me some feedback? And the guy goes, it's not very good. And Ram Dass had a stroke. And I think it was like the New York Times theorized that he gave himself the stroke so that he could be in hospice to figure out what he would need to put in the book. I
Wow.
mean, it's, you know, it
Yeah.
sounds creepy and stupid, but it is just the thought is how much, you know, it's like Lakoff and the neuroscientist saying 80% of what we do is unconscious. You
Hmm.
know, it's coming from the unconscious. That's sort
Yeah.
of like we think I think we were both pretty conscious for the last 90 minutes.
Hmm.
But you think 80% of us was saying these words unconsciously? Or, you
Yeah.
know, no, they weren't saying that they were coming from unconscious places.
I think the unconscious is just where, we have a light in our consciousness and it shines, right? And it's shining, it's like focused in like right now as we talk to each other, right? But
Yeah,
that's not all that has to do with consciousness. So the unconscious is the space you're not consciously aware of when you're focused on something. I think there are forces in the unconscious that make their way into the conscious, right? Whether it's from a psychoanalytic perspective, but we have yet to really understand what the unconscious is. I think it's the spiritual world. I think it's the dream world. I think it's the psychedelic world. I think it's just the place that your human light that's shining is not shining at the moment, right? And it can only shine so much, right? So there are forces outside of our perception and awareness that come in and out. And I think last part of when you talked about those Ram Dass, so the monks at the monasteries, right? They will get sick and like they'll have a cold and they'll be thankful for it. Like they're thankful for their afflictions. It's a weird thing. It's like loving your enemy, being thankful for everything because it
yeah,
comes from God, right? Which sounds like, doesn't sound like anything, but imagine actually being able to love your enemy or be thankful
yeah,
for your afflictions. It's a good thing to aim to.
yeah. It's a beautiful aspiration. So Marshall says this question. He doesn't pose it as a probe. Oh, well, he poses it as a probe. He doesn't probe it as a concept. How about technologies as the collective unconscious and art as the collective unconsciousness? So he's basically saying technology and art, and then conscious and consciousness. So, how do you differentiate? What is he saying? What's the difference between conscious and consciousness? Why does he call technologies the collective unconscious and art the collective unconsciousness?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's also what's the relationship between techne and technology, right? And what are the roots? Where are the origins of technology? Where does it come from? Heidegger said technology is nothing technological. The Book of Enoch has, and I think this is what speaks to the idea of the unconscious being these spiritual spaces that we're not aware of, but that influence us. And so I think where did technology come in the Book of Enoch? It came from angels and demons. It came from what, let's say, spiritual beings that influenced the young humanity and taught them how to develop tools. And this development of tools led to the development and building of cities, but also weapons, right? So the origins of technology are unconscious because they came from, you know, outer inner space, multiple dimensions, the heavenly realms, the space that we're not attuned to in our perceptual kind of frequencies. So I think that's why it's unconscious, because it's the unconscious is the space that we don't have awareness of. Like, the dog's not aware of my 401k concerns, right? Is that part of the dog's unconscious? I don't know. But you know what I'm saying? There are levels to this, right? So just to assume that with their apex of all animality, and then we have everything's below us. There are beings that are constructed differently than we can really imagine, but not really above us. And from these beings we get information. Some of that information is how to build tools, but it's located in the space that we're not aware of, and that is
Yeah,
the unconscious. Now, to say that art is unconsciousness, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I don't know either, right? But nothing
yeah.
comes to mind
But no,
where
he said
yeah.
technology is unconsciousness. Wait,
Hmm.
yeah. And yeah, it's a funny question that he asks that is yeah, he says art. No, you're right. He says art is collective unconsciousness. You were right. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's art. Yeah. and technology is collective unconscious. So,
Mhm.
anyways, let's move on because it's something we could probe more in the future. I just have
Yep.
a few more because Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Who is entitled to make the rules? Those that have to live under them, those that have to follow them. I think,
Yeah.
I don't know how much deeper I think getting to that, where those that make the rules are impacted by the rules.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a test, because that always degenerates. But I think that's right.
Good. Nassim Taleb said, games were created to give non heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, you don't know who really won or lost, but you can tell who a hero is and who is not. So someone told me from that quote that villains don't think they're bad, they want control. Heroes want freedom. So it's a lot of thoughts, but the what I come out of this is, does punishment work? So you catch a villain, you you do you punish them? What do we do with villains?
Yeah, I think maybe it's on the intention of the person doing the punishment, of why the punishment is happening and for what reason, right?
Yeah.
Is I think that probably has a big part to play, but I don't think that you can, like, punish someone to believe something, like, genuinely. You can't coerce them. Like when I was thinking about, I'm thinking about converting to Christianity, right? In general, you cannot punish one to do it. You cannot coerce one. You cannot rationally talk someone
Yeah.
into it. You cannot tell them something. It's not something that you can. It's not something that's done to others. So again, it depends on what the intention for the punishment is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Question my decision-making process in my life, how I ended up in this absurd moment.
That was, one of my best answers ever was that. It was this, I wouldn't be in a situation
Right.
like that. But this you will love this because it's back to the McLuhan's first book, Mechanical Bride. It's Descent in the Maelstrom, short story by Edgar Allan Poe. This woman on the Venice boardwalk, I asked her that question. She says, I'd take the velocity of the bag of shit and I'd use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. I says, that's a descent in the maelstrom. That's you look at the patterns of the broken boat swooping you down to your death and you use them to swoop your way out. So,
Yeah, I
okay.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, three more and we're out of here. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
I'm seeing more people um, move towards ideas that they didn't consider, that weren't considered popular, possible, feasible, interesting in the past. And I think that the solution to a lot of the problems are in these ideas that are being explored more and more these days.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thornton Wilder, a total James Joyce Finnegan's Wake freak in 1928, said, art is confession. Art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. James, you've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
I don't know. I don't know, but I'm happy to find out with you.
That is a great answer. I don't know, but I'm happy to find out.
Yeah, with you. So this is part of
That's
it, man.
beautiful. That is beautiful. What gives you the most optimism?
My kids.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with the generic one there, but I mean it. My kids.
Well, no, that's that, dude. 99% of people say youth. So
Hmm.
it's a full circle time we spent, James. The first question is what's the best thing for a human being? That's Wilhelm Reich. That's James saying other people. The question they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life was, what gives you the most optimism? He said, other people. Yeah,
Very
so
interesting.
we'll go back to why I found you on YouTube. Was Marshall McLuhan said communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible,
Hmm.
especially if you're trying to share the journey with someone as smart as you. So thank you so much, James. This has really been enlightening. I really had a great time. I learned a lot, and I thank you.
Yeah, likewise. And I feel like I'm gonna get a kind of email with my Gerry Fialka archetype from these questions. So you should develop your own archetypes of the type of person. You know what you do with like personality quizzes, and I think something would come up there. But thank you, sir. It was appreciate your time, and I can't wait to see you again.
Yeah, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope we can keep talking forever and ever.
Likewise. God bless.